Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's William Bellomy. This video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to respond to some questions I got through a DM and Twitter because it was some really valid questions about how I form my opinion and stuff and what my background is that makes me think I can speak on these subjects. But like always, like, subscribe, share with your friends, comment on what I'm saying if you like it, hit the notification bell. If you disagree with me, then hit dislike and tell me why in the comments. We can have a discussion about it. I'm open minded enough that maybe you'll change my mind, but I could change yours. And by the same token, that diversity of opinion coming at you is a good thing because it even makes you stop and rethink how you feel, even if you don't change your mind. But it reminds you, yeah, this is why I think this way. Now, with that, we'll go ahead and get started. The first is my interest in politics. Well, that's been basically my entire life. I remember as a kid sitting in a gas line during the oil embargo in New Orleans, Louisiana, trying to figure out what's going on. I also remember making a trip from the Houston area to Midland, Odessa, Texas, which is a 12-hour drive. It's, for me, as a kid, it was pretty cool because I generally ride with my grandparents who would spoil me with comic books and anything else I wanted. And there was a truck stop along the way that we always stopped at that had a 10-4 burger. And here in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do an interview with my sister on here. We're going to talk about some subjects, so it'll bring up some other stuff. And I'm going to try to get my mom to do one too, because there's one story of one of those trips that I find really, really funny that I want to tell on here, but it'll be funnier with her. But on one of those trips, I woke up in the back seat and I saw a sign that said, "You're entering Iran." Because there is a town called Iran in West Texas. It's spelled Iraan. And this is while the hostages were being held in Tehran. And I was about 7 or 8 years old. So, yeah, that's how early my interest in politics came about. Now, add to that my interest in government. There was these little cartoon infomercials for kids on Saturday mornings. And one of them, it had a rolled up piece of paper that had bill written on it. And it talked about the process of how things become laws. From the House to the Senate, if it has to go to conference, then on to the president, and he can sign it or veto it. If he vetoes it, this is what they'll do. And I've always had an interest in it because of that. It really caught my eye and really got my attention. And I know some people in the Army that knew me would really be surprised at what a nerd I can be with this stuff. But yeah, I really am that into it. And when we get to education, you'll see just how far I'm into it. But as we move forward, I really didn't talk about politics outside of my own home for the entire 23 years I was in the Army because I didn't feel it was my place. I swore an oath to defend the Constitution, and nowhere in there did it say only if I agree with the president. I enlisted under a Republican, then it re-enlisted under a Democrat, and served under another Republican and another Democrat. They each had their pluses and minuses, whether you like them or not. But as a serving soldier, it's not your place to judge that. Your place is to do your job and follow your orders as long as they're legal. Now, moving on, my time in the military. As a teenager, made a lot of stupid choices and got into some trouble and dropped out of school. I joined the Army and actually liked it from the very beginning on because to me, it was a great environment. I was rewarded for doing a good job, and just all I had to do was do my job, be honest, and be in the right place at the right time in the right uniform with the right attitude. I served in Germany just after the Cold War ended, which is part of my feelings about socialism. I actually traveled to former socialist countries that used to be part of the Soviet bloc. I also had neighbors who grew up in the Soviet Union or the DDR, or what was East Germany, so you could talk to them about what it was like growing up there. So yeah, that helped form my opinion of why I'm against socialism. Because I've actually traveled to those countries and talked to people that were from there. Now, later on in my military career, you started having people come in that grew up in these former communist and socialist countries. So you were able to talk to them and understand what it was like for them to grow up. And it really does help form your opinion because you can read all the books you want. Because I've read Marx and Engels, I've read the Little Red Book, I've read Shea, It's actually meeting people who grew up there, because the theory is great, but when you talk to people who were there, you actually see what happened in the execution of it. Now, we talked about Germany. I've also served in South Korea, Central America. I was in Panama when the Haitian refugees were there. I've been to South America. I've been throughout Africa. Of course, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. And you form opinions about stuff while you're there. I got a whole video in Afghanistan, and it'll probably surprise some of my friends that have never heard my opinion that, yeah, maybe it is time for us to pack up and let them use the tools we gave them and figure out their own future. Now, as I'm filming this, there was just a shakeup at the Department of Defense, and President Trump has said they're withdrawing more troops from Afghanistan and Iraq. And I think that's a great thing. I really do. I think there's been enough blood and gold spent there that it's time for our country to move on and allow our young men and women a chance to serve without ending up in the middle of a quagmire. Now, my assignments were varied. I came into contact with a lot of really great people. I'm really not going to name names, and there's going to be a lot of opinions I don't give about the military, because there's still senior leaders who I serve with, who I'm friends with, and who I've got a lot of respect for. And I never want something I say to be used against them. And if you're wondering where that comes from, there's a Rolling Stone article about things said by members of General McChrystal's staff about the vice president, which led to his forced retirement. I never want to put somebody I respect and am friends with in a position like that, because that's unfair. But I served for 23 years, most of it on airborne status, which is a lot of fun if you've never done it. Multiple combat deployments and operational deployments. I had a good time in the Army. Looking back, I can honestly say everything the Army promised me when I joined, I got. There's not a single thing they cheated me out of. It was just time for me to retire and make way for people coming up for a lot of reasons. Now, moving on to education. As I said, I dropped out of high school. When I finally did get my GED and go to college, I majored in international relations with a minor in economics, which, once again, you spend all this time jumping out of airplanes and then you get a degree in something that most people consider pretty nerdy, but it was very interesting to me. And part of it, I'll bring up why, and it goes to what General John Campbell talked about in Afghanistan. When we were there for our tour, we were walking into the operations center one day and just talking to him, and he brought up it'll take 20 years to turn Afghanistan into a nation. Well, we've been there for 19, and I'm not sure us being there is going to help that process anymore. So moving forward, we'll see what happens. Later, I graduated with a Master of Public Administration. I'm currently in another graduate course, which once I complete that, I will be a public policy PhD student or candidate in social reform. Will be my particular area that I'm interested in. And that's based on working in prisons. That's based on working with homeless people as a workforce development specialist. It's based on what I saw when I worked at the state capitol and some of the issues I see in society today. I'm not against social welfare programs, but I think we need better management and better policy to make them effective. I was also asked about sports. I'm a huge football fan, and I love boxing. Now, my football teams, stay away from my Longhorns. And for all you haters out there, I still love my Cowboys, no matter how disappointing and depressing a season is, because there's always next season. Dak, get healthy. We're waiting for you to come back. Now, other than that, I used to read a lot. I don't read as much anymore because I discovered Audible. And no, they're not paying for this. But yeah, if you're tied up for time, then get Audible. You can listen to it when you're doing other stuff. I listen to it when I'm in my vehicle going from A to B. I listen to it while I'm in the gym. I listen to it while I'm running. It's great. It really is. Now, some of the people on YouTube that I've listened to along the way and watched that kind of encouraged me to do this, the first, far and away, is Tim Pool. He's got 2 channels, which I'll link to below. But he's a liberal who ended up voting for Trump. But he's willing to sit down with anybody and talk about what's going on as long as it's worth his time and worth his audience's time. So check him out. It's really good. Patrick Bet David, the channel Valuetainment, also really good. Really diverse group of people that he interviews. And he will give his opinion. He and his family left Iran as refugees. He's now a multimillionaire. He basically is the American dream. His channel's linked to below. He's got some really great interviews with a huge diversity of people. The one I actually saw an interview that he did with her is Miss Park, Voice of North Korea. She escaped North Korea at 13 years old, and she actually discusses what it was like to grow up in North Korea and also her harrowing journey to get to the United States. Very, very strong, very intelligent, very well-spoken woman. Please check out her channel. And Vosh, believe it or not, an avowed socialist, because he's a fairly smart guy. He's well-spoken. He doesn't try to hide or mask how he feels about anything. And he's willing to debate with almost anybody about his beliefs. And to me, if you're concrete in your beliefs, you are always willing to debate. You are always willing to have that discussion. Because you want to hear those opposing opinions. Because it'll either give you a stronger foundation or a reason to research more, which gives you the ability to speak more intelligently about the subject. Now, all those channels are linked to below. And the other was what I'm working on. Well, currently we talked about Audible. I'm listening to the Antifa handbook, because I did one video on Antifa and BLM, but I actually want to do a more in-depth video about Antifa. So I'm doing some more research for that. And I'm also working on one on human trafficking. And honestly, those 2 right there, I really want to make sure I have my facts and my data straight, because it's too easy for people to argue against what you're saying if you don't have your data locked in, if you don't have your sources. So it's taking me a little bit more time than I wanted to, but it's because I'm trying to be more thorough in my research for these, and then start focusing on veteran issues and homelessness. But that's where I see the channel going. So thanks for the questions. You know the standard: like, subscribe, share with your friends, make a comment. Go ahead and check out my Twitter and Instagram. I haven't been as active on them as I'm going to start being. If you don't like what I'm saying, then hit dislike and leave a comment and tell me why. If you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, yeah, don't bother. No, I'm just kidding. Diversity of opinion, right? But yeah, like, subscribe, share with your friends, make a comment. If you want to, give me a couple of weeks and my Patreon will be up and going a little bit stronger with more stuff on it. But with that, everybody have a good evening.